My name is BreAnn Osborne, BRE capital ANNE, Osborne OSBORN, and I'm an epidemiologist at the Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you so much, BreAnn. So, we're talking about valley fever. Can you just start with an overview of what it is and how people contract it?
Yeah, so valley fever is an illness caused by a fungus that lives in the soil. So when that fungus, when that soil gets kicked up into the air, people can breathe in those fungal spores, and it can make them sick. Usually people have symptoms like coughing, fever, shortness of breath. And most people have very mild symptoms, and some may not have symptoms at all. But there are some people, particularly those who are older or maybe immunocompromised, who can have more severe illness.
And I know you mentioned this already, but I would love to just get a good understanding of some of the symptoms that present if you may have been exposed to those spores.
Yeah, so it's generally respiratory symptoms, that coughing, fever, shortness of breath. Some people may be diagnosed with pneumonia, and they may have some chest pain as well. That's typically what we see. In more rare cases, there can be some skin lesions or rashes or things like that, but it's really the respiratory symptoms that we tend to see most commonly.
And how is this contracted? I know you mentioned kicking up dust. What are some ways that this could, get into the air and someone could contract it?
Yeah, so it's really any way that dust gets kicked up into the air. Construction work can be one way. Recreational activities like four-wheel riding or ATV driving can be another way. Really, anything that's going to disrupt that soil it can be a risk of suspending that into the air.
And from your knowledge, is this present in Utah? And has there been any sort of growth of this in Utah?
Yeah, great question. So valley fever is really a southwestern United States disease. Most of the cases in the United States come from Arizona and the San Joaquin Valley in California. In Utah, we do know that our southwestern portion of the state, particularly the St. George area, is endemic for the fungus that causes valley fever. And so that's where we see most of the cases in our state. We do suspect the fungus lives in other areas of the state. We don't have a very good understanding of where exactly that is, and what the risk is in other areas of the state. So that's something we're continually trying to study and to work with some of our academic partners to understand more of. But we have seen a pretty steady increase in the number of cases reported over the last several years. And we think some of this may be because the region where the fungus can live is expanding, particularly with climate change as things get warmer. There's areas expanding beyond the St. George region that are suitable for the fungus to live.
If you are someone who lives near construction, where there's a lot of dust, where there's blasting, how can you protect yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it can be tricky, right? Because we all need to breathe and it's kind of unavoidable to some extent. Um, some things that people can do, if you're noticing that there's a lot of dust and dirt in the air and you want to take a walk outside, you might consider wearing an N95 mask. We particularly recommend that for people who are doing activities that kick up that dust and soil. But that's certainly something that you can do if you're concerned. Um, for construction workers or people who are digging and doing things that are going to disrupt the soil around their home or recreational activities, you might consider wetting down the soil with water to try and keep more of that dust and dirt on the ground rather than it coming up into the air where you can breathe it in.
Are there any populations that are more vulnerable to contracting valley fever?
Yeah, so older adults tend to be some of the people who get more severely sick, and people with compromised immune systems.
And is there any way to know if you're in an area where this fungus is in the soil? Is there any tests or anything that you can do as a resident to just be aware of what's going on around you, especially if you're near a place where there's a lot of construction happening?
Well, there's not a really great way to tell if the soil around you has the fungus in it. The fungus is called coccidioides. We know the St. George area has a lot of it in its soil. It's not necessarily evenly dispersed through the soil. So certainly not every area, even in that area in the St. George region, is going to have the fungus in it. And so that's something that we're trying to understand a little bit more from our data and our end. Can we understand a little bit more about where this is and who is most at risk in our state?
So just to make sure I'm understanding, as of right now, is there a way to like test the ground, or is it just we generally know it's here and it could kind of be anywhere in the ground, we just don't know?
So there are ways to test, and certainly some of our academic partners are doing that testing of soil, but it's not something that an ordinary resident can go out and do. It can be costly and may not give you the answers you're looking for.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add or you think that people should know, specifically in a part of the state where we are growing so rapidly and everywhere you go, there's dust?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to my mind is that some doctors may not think to test for valley fever all the time. So certainly, if you have respiratory symptoms or have pneumonia or something and aren't getting better after maybe antibiotic treatment, maybe talk to your doctor and ask about getting tested for valley fever. Certainly, a lot of people are misdiagnosed or have delayed diagnoses for a long time. And so asking your doctor to get tested can help alleviate some concerns.